Hey, good morning, folks. Pastor Stephen back again with another No Frills daily devotional. And I need you to brace yourself today, all right? Because I'm going to ask a cringy question, all right? If you've been tracking with any of these videos, I've been talking about this topic of suffering. And this one question has kind of been playing in the background of my mind all week long, all right? So brace yourself because here it comes. Why does God allow suffering? All right, so we've been talking about suffering. It begs that question. Why does God allow suffering? Now, that is a cringy question, and it's a sticking point. It really is for a lot of people because if you've ever had a conversation with somebody else about Jesus and you've been trying to talk to them about why you follow Jesus and they've responded back with why they don't follow Jesus, a lot of times it comes down to this topic and this issue of suffering, right? Because the questions that always arise with this, okay, so how can God exist, right? All right, Stephen, how can God exist if suffering exists? Or a lot of times it's asked like, how can God be good if suffering exists? All right. Now, let me tell you a little story about Maddie's knee. All right. Maddie's my daughter. And this week at recess, she was playing a game called Foursquare. All right. And she comes home with this big gash in her knee, right? A lot of pain. We've been dealing with it a little bit each night as we've been trying to clean it out and help it to heal, right? And so here's the deal though, okay? I exist. I'm Maddie's dad. I'm right here. You can see me, okay? I exist, right? But Maddie still got hurt, okay? I exist, but she still got hurt. And I'm a pretty good dad. Maddie would tell you that I'm a pretty good dad, all right? And I'm a good dad, but she still got hurt. The fact that she got hurt doesn't change the fact that I'm here. And it doesn't change the fact that I'm a good dad, right? Now, I'm not trying to say that I'm God, right? But think about it in that context. Like, we are God's creation, we are God's children, and yet, yes, suffering happens, bad things happen, and bad things do happen to good people every single day. Remember, being a follower of Jesus isn't a ticket out of suffering. A lot of times it's a backstage pass into it, right? Okay, so but here's the deal. I wasn't there. And that didn't change the fact, but God isn't God everywhere, Stephen? Yes, he is. So think about it like this. Even if I had been there at that Foursquare game during recess, what would I have had to do to protect my daughter from getting a gash in her knee? I would have had to control every aspect of the situation. In fact, to keep my daughter from getting hurt, chances are, you know what I would have had to do? I would have had to have told her, sorry, Maddie, I'm not going to let you play Foursquare today. Right? But then wouldn't that have caused me to not be a good dad? And would she have experienced some sort of suffering because now her dad isn't letting her play Foursquare and now her friends are wondering, right? I'm just trying to use this analogy to unpack this idea that suffering is a control issue. Okay? And that's where I want to land today. Suffering is a control issue. It's a control problem. See, suffering exists because free will exists. And I would argue that God doesn't allow suffering, so to speak. What he does allow is free will. And because free will exists, suffering exists. We were created in the garden. Okay, we were created to be creative, okay, as human beings, right? But look what we've created with that role as being creative, right? We've created good things in this world, definitely, but we've also created bad things in this world. I was just having a conversation with a coworker yesterday about how she's taking on a new job and she's going to be working for a company that assembles clutches for trucks, right? And think about how a clutch. It's so ornate and it's just so pinpoint in its accuracy and all these little things that have to go into assembling a clutch, which is just one tiny little piece of a big truck engine, right? Right? But that little piece, it took some creativity to create that. And a clutch is a good thing, right? We used our creativity to make something good. Yay, we made a clutch. But also on the flip side, humans use their creativity to create something like a crucifixion, right? Where you nail somebody to a cross, but you beat them first, okay? And then you assemble these wood posts, and then you put nails through their hands and through their feet, and you stick them up there, and then you sledgehammer their legs so that they can't lift their bodies up, so then they can suffocate. And then eventually, just to make sure that they die, a decent death, you take a spear and you jab it into their rib cage so that they bleed out and suffocate at the same time, right? We use our creativity for good, but we use our creativity for bad, and suffering exists because of our free will. Every single aspect of suffering comes from the result of something that humanity has created, right? And so in order for God to take away suffering, you know what would be on the line? Free will. He would have to take away free will. Car accidents exist because of free will. Environmental problems exist because of free will. Violence and murder exist because of free will. So in order to take away all of our suffering, God would have to take away our free will. And essentially, we're asking God, when we're asking Him to take away suffering, we're asking Him to control everything and everyone around us. Just don't control me, right? That's the only way that Maddie wouldn't have got hurt playing at recess the other day. I would have had to control everybody in that Foursquare game and everything around the Foursquare game, but she still wanted to play Foursquare. So I would have had to control everything and everyone else except for her. And when we ask God to take away suffering, that's what we're doing. God, control everything and everyone. Just please don't control me. Right? And so suffering exists because free will exists. And in order to take away suffering, God would have to take away free will. And I want to kind of leave you with this point. See, suffering, it's not about God's inaction. Okay, and I tried to hit that in the previous episode that I did, where Jesus talked about Jesus being in the same boat. Okay, he's in the same boat as you. He went through suffering just like you do. He's in the same boat. Suffering isn't about God's inaction. It's about our actions and what we're doing and what we're creating and what we're allowing to exist in our lives. I'm going to leave you with a passage, though. Okay, I don't want to leave you just with a concept. I'm going to leave you with a passage. I'm going to take you back to 1 Peter. This is chapter 2, verses 22 through 24, because I want you to realize this. God redeemed suffering. Okay, let me show you what I mean by that. And so this is talking about Jesus here. Peter's writing again. He says, He committed no sin, and no deceit was found in His mouth. When they hurled their insults at Him, He did not retaliate. And when He suffered, He made no threats. Instead, He entrusted Himself to Him, talking about God, who judges justly. And He Himself bore our sins in His body on the tree, so that we might die to sins and live for righteousness. By His wounds you have been healed. And what is Peter trying to say in that text? And how does it apply to this idea of suffering? Peter's trying to illustrate this idea that God redeemed the suffering that we created, right? By subjecting Himself to suffering, by subjecting Himself to the cross, He redeemed suffering in order to restore us to righteousness. The God of heaven and earth, the creator of all things in the universe, allowed Himself to be subjected to the suffering that you and I created as humans, and in order to redeem us and restore us to the life of righteousness that he originally planned for us all along, you guys. Hey, have an awesome day and be blessed.